So my name is Chloe Condon, everyone. I am a developer evangelist at CodeFresh. Today I'm going to talk about the somewhat controversial title here, why you need to stop using the staging server. Notice "the" is in all caps. I know this is kind of a outlandish claim here, but here at CodeFresh we really believe it. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through what I mean by that. Don't worry, you're still going to actually kind of use the staging server, spoiler alert, but I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So the intention of what I want to kind of show in this talk is give you a new perception of how to view your staging environment. So for quite some time, we've been viewing our CI/CD as using the staging server, and that's been a very meaningful part of our pipeline. But what I want to show you today is, given today's latest technologies, we can actually kind of rethink our pipeline and kind of rethink the way that we do continuous integration and deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So a little bit about me. My name is Chloe, as I mentioned. I'm a developer, mentor, and advocate for women in tech and an evangelist at CodeFresh. I'm a blogger of all things container, diversity related, and Docker related. You can follow me on Twitter and Medium here. You may have seen my What It's Like to Be a Woman at a Tech Conference blog, where I'm doing a lot of thumbs up in front of lovely crowds of people, so go ahead and check that out. So a little bit about CodeFresh. We're a Docker native CI/CD. We're known for our really fast builds, our pre-staging environments, and our unique image management capabilities. And it's really built with those Docker users in mind. Who here is using Docker? Awesome, cool. And what about Kubernetes, maybe? Okay, a couple. In production? Woo! Awesome, okay, cool. So here's a little mini agenda of what I'm going to be talking about today. So first we'll talk about common CI/CD implementations and the challenges we run into with those implementations. And then finally we'll chat about containers and their impact on traditional CI/CD. So I'm sure mostly all of us here have seen a Git flow before or know of Git flow, but I'll just break it down for anybody who may not know. So I don't need to go into too much detail here, but the main thing I want to highlight in these slides is that many of you have probably implemented your CI that you use slightly differently, and I'm not here to preach to you that you're doing it wrong or you should be doing it a certain way, but I do want to show you kind of this main model of a Git flow. So a real quick rundown, we have the master branch, and that's what we have in production, and then we have our staging and development branch, which is what we have in staging. And then whenever a developer is getting a task assigned to him, we go down to this development branch. If we're good developers, we're hopefully using unit tests. We then do a pull request, which we do another set of unit tests and code review, and then a majority of our testing and kind of the heavy lifting is really done at the staging server. So, and if I go to the next slide here, so in the traditional way of CI/CD, as I mentioned before, this is where most of the heavy lifting is, and I have this kind of cost graph down here at the bottom, and the further along in this process that we are doing that, the more costly it is for us. Let's say that staging breaks. We all know that's not very fun. Or we have to wait for staging. A lot of bottlenecks occur at staging. So that's really pricey, right? For DevOps, for engineers, it's time, and time is very valuable. So it's very costly for us to fix these issues at this point. So if I'm working on my feature branch and then later I want to fix the issues, it just kind of, it's a little annoying. It's the traditional way that we've been doing it for a while. So another aspect of this is with continuous integration is that sort of handshake that we have between development and deployment. So a typical handshake, we have a label or a stamp in the code base, the test report and results, any proposed changes to our database, and then also any of the known issues that are going out. So communicating this as part of the release notes is usually the way we go about this. And great, so what are the challenges? We've kind of touched on a few of these, but I'll review a couple that we typically see. So first of all, we're all familiar with someone broke staging. That usually kind of holds us back until that can be fixed. And while that's really frustrating for the whole team, it's even more frustrating for the developers who made that change and broke the staging environment for everyone else. So that's likely to happen when we implement a process where our code changes will break, and if they're being tested for UI and integration, it's on the first time we're seeing that is on the staging environment, right? So there's really no room for feedback until it's too late. Typically the mentality when we're at staging is, all right, let's go ahead and ship it. As a developer, that's very frustrating for me because I want to be able to implement feedback ahead of time. And I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to work on this again. I would really like to see it in action beforehand, so that way if someone says, hey, actually, we were thinking of taking the feature another way, I can make those changes ahead of time, and those changes don't get deployed. And then lastly, we have the frictions between, which is a really great segue to containers, the frictions that we find between different development environments, staging environment, production environments, and then issues usually stem from, not necessarily from these differences, but, and they stem from the differences and not really the code base itself. So we have some flows in the process that are really time consuming, and we end up finding a lot of issues with that. And then we find out, hey, it's not the code, but I didn't have the correct environmental variable that I needed to make this run successfully. So containers are a really great way to solve that, right? So to summarize, kind of before I go into the container aspect of this, the main issue is that the code changes and the pull requests are being tested for a lot more extensively and for the first time when we get to staging, and not earlier on in the life cycle. So there's really no room for feedback, as I mentioned. Product owners can't really communicate that, and there's a common joke of like, what the customer had in mind, what the engineer had in mind, and what the sales engineer had in mind, and then what the developer ended up doing. And when we get to staging, it's too late. The typical response is, already in staging, let's push what we have, wait for the next iteration, and when will that be? And that's where we'll make the correction or fix, but what if there was a way that we could do that ahead of time? And that's sort of the concept that I'm pitching to you guys today. So, and then finally, there's the friction between environments as well. So here's the fun part. So we did a raise of hands earlier if who's working with containers or Docker if you're not. We can kind of go into a little bit of detail here. So as I mentioned earlier, containers have fundamentally changed the way that we kind of think through things as developers. It's reshaped the way we build software. It makes kind of the operational parts of things a lot easier for us, and it helps us rethink the way that we did things before. So I'll start with a very basic impact. The first impact is CI/CD, especially in our pipelines, and then we'll get a little more complex. But the very first and basic thing that I want to cover is we can run every step of CI inside of our container. So as you know, as we work with containers, each time we run a new container, it's a new, fresh instance of that image. So we almost are completely eliminating any chance of new builds being impacted by leftovers from any previous builds, because we're simply just getting a fresh new instance of it each time. So if you're isolating the builds and you're giving each fresh container, getting a new fresh container each time that we rerun and build it and compile the code, there's a lot less of a chance of an error popping up randomly. And the second aspect is the unit test itself. So on the other hand, we give it to operations to deploy it into production, and it's a much reliable, more self-contained unit to hand off. So we know our Docker image has passed all our tests, our unit tests, our integration tests, security tests. So the likelihood of a Docker image suddenly just working completely different in production than on staging is going to be much less frequent than just moving our code from one stage to the other. So that's why working with Docker images is a much more complete way to sort of describe our application and describe our code. And it's not only our code, but it's everything else that we need to run with it. So zooming out a little bit from the Docker image itself, one of the strong drivers to containers and adoption is microservices. So containers have been built from day one to support microservices. And it has all the ways that we can sort of define the linkages between those things, whether we're using Docker Compose or Kubernetes, like a couple of you said that you're using, Mesos, they all have slightly different ways of defining it, but essentially they're all telling the application how it's going to work. So containers really allow us to define the application much easier with microservices, which ultimately allow us to clone our staging environment a lot easier. So we can create a staging-like environment a lot more simply. So that's kind of what I'm getting to here. You know, what if there was a way that we could actually clone our staging environment before we went to staging? And I'm here to tell you there is a way. So as I mentioned before, containers are really designed for microservice architecture. And the reason that I'm saying staging-like environment versus staging environment is we have a rule that our staging environment has to be as identical as possible to what we have in production, right? There's certain things that we still want the staging environment for, like if I'm running a shopping site on Black Friday, I really want to be able to make sure that it can handle the extra 100,000 users that I have coming on that day. So I'm going to build a staging server that really mimics my production environment for testing like that. But for other testing types, so UI tests or integration tests, we don't really necessarily need the scalability that we would have with a traditional staging server. So we just need all the pieces of the application. And so we can work with our code, we can test our features. So microservices sort of allow us to clone this a lot earlier in the life cycle with a staging-like environment. With that staging-like environment, this actually opens up a couple of different options that we didn't have before. So if I'm able to spin up a very similar version of my application, I'm able to get feedback a lot earlier. So I could send that smaller staging environment to my manager or to a customer or even to my coworker and say, hey, is this what we were looking for? Is this along the lines of what we were looking what we're looking to do? And they can give me a thumbs up or the thumbs down, or change that comment to teal instead of maroon. I'm able to implement that feedback instead of getting it a lot later when it's going to be a lot more costly for me. And there's nothing kind of holding me back from implementing those changes at that point. So you may be kind of asking, well, if we can't have an environment exactly like the staging environment, how can I test for performance much earlier? And the typical way we do this with our customers at CodeFresh is that you'll test for SLA, the SLA that you have for your application in your staging environment, since that environment is pretty identical to what you have in production, so you can test your SLA then. But you can run your tests much earlier in the life cycle with a less scalable environment. So we've kind of moved everything over to the left here. We have our unit and integration tests, we have our performance tests, our UI tests, and that's a lot cheaper for us to run those earlier because we're not creating bottlenecks at staging, where the staging server's not going to break from kind of spinning up this smaller environment. And if we go back and we look at the staging environment, I did a little spoiler here and told you it was all going to move left, but we can see that we can do these tests a lot earlier. They can all be shifted over, and there's no reason for us to kind of stick to this way that we've implemented CI, where the staging environment's really the first time that we're testing our code and other people are seeing our code. So the more we shift these over to the left, the faster we're able to identify these issues. And then also, we have a lot less bottlenecks in production, and our pipeline is a lot more streamlined. So that way we can, when we push code changes into production, we know that container is going to run smoothly. The chances of something popping up that we didn't catch earlier in the process are going to be a lot less likely. And then last but not least, we have our Docker image here. That's really a great revised way of knowing what our deliverables are. We're handing off that Docker image. It's a lot more self-contained. And then if we find an issue in the Docker image versus like a branch, if I rerun the same image with all the other microservices, it's much more easier to reproduce and to tackle it ahead of time. So this is the same Git flow that we had before. We have the feature branch, we have master, we have staging. But if we're working on the feature branch, there's nothing really holding us back from running these tests a lot earlier. If you remember from the previous slide, we were doing a lot more of the testing over here on this end, but kind of zooming out from a single microservice that lets you define more than one, and then you can set up your volumes and your networks between those, but it's an abstract way of defining an application, and it allows you to get those kind of instances of your application on demand versus waiting for staging. And then you can use Docker Compose or Docker Swarm. Those are really great ways to scale your application. You can use Kubernetes. It's also a really great way to run your containers, and you kind of have different ways of describing your application. And a lot of them not only kind of let you describe how your application is running, but much earlier in the life cycle, you can have that for your feature branch and everything else around it. So I can send a link to my team, I can get feedback on it, I can incorporate that much earlier, and then by the time I go to staging, I know that that's a pretty clean branch. Great. So it's a lot more automatic way to do this. I only have a couple minutes, so I'm just going to show you a little peek of how we do this at CodeFresh. Oops, this over. This is not what I'm looking for. Let's see. Okay, I'm just going to do it this way. So, CodeFresh is totally free. You can try it today. We have set up a way in our application that you can actually use these pre-staging environments. We've built that. You could, of course, build your own tools, but we already have it made. Just sign in with my GitHub account here, and I'm going to add a repository. And this is just a really simple chat application that we've made for the sake of this. It's a Node.js application with a Mongo database. So I'm going to click here. Great, so I can start from a template and just pick whatever technology I want. I can use a CodeFresh YAML. That's going to be like a more advanced way of setting things up. But I have a Docker file, so I'm just going to select my Docker file from here. This is just confirming that the path to my Docker file is at the root of my repository. And this is confirming I have the correct Docker file, since as you know, sometimes we can have more than one Docker file in our repo. So I'm going to click create. And great, so my repo is added, so I'm going to click build here. And the first time that this builds, it'll probably take a minute or two. The second time, it'll probably take a couple seconds. And that's just because any time that I'm building, I'm really only adding the additional layers, because CodeFresh is caching all those layers. So I can actually click in here and see what's going on. If I remember how to click the mouse, apparently. There we go. So all this is live, building the Docker image. In the meantime, I'll just hop over here. So these are all of my repositories. This is where all my pipelines live. I can view all my builds as well as the success and failure for those builds. This is where all my images are going to live and the metadata for those images. Compositions. So compositions help us facilitate what I was talking about before. So I can use compositions to create a composition which will run my application with my tests. And I'm able to run my application with my database, for example, and I can run my tests up against that. But my compositions can also spin up a pre-staging environment where I can actually see my application running on CodeFresh. And I will show you that in a moment. Environments is pretty obvious. That's where those pre-staging environments live. And then we just added a Kubernetes beta, so if you're working with Kubernetes, we have a really simple way of deploying with Kubernetes in like 10 minutes. And you would just come in here and put your credentials. So let's see what's going on. Cool, so this was successful. So I'm just going to spin up a composition to show you what that pre-staging environment would look like for us. So I'm going to call this demo. And so I can use a file in my repository, like a Docker Compose file, which I'm sure we've all seen. I can use a template, but I actually am just going to do it with an empty composition, even though I have a Docker Compose file. So here I would select my repository, and I know I need to run this on port 5000. And you'll see, like, as I'm typing this stuff in, we're kind of creating that Docker Compose file on the right-hand side. So cool, add my port. And then I also need Mongo to run this composition. That's the whole reason why I'm making the composition, is being able to run those two things together. So I am just going to type Mongo in here. hard to spell when you're looking at a giant screen. Okay, cool. Great, so I'm gonna save that. I can come in here and edit it myself if I want. We also can add any composition variables that we want or set our main application service, but cool. And then here's my image that I built earlier. And I have all of the metadata for my image living in here, everything from the SHA, the last commit, what pipeline I'm using, the image size, as well as the Docker file, and the logs, the layers. I'm just gonna kind of rush through this. But we have this launch icon here, which is not to be confused with deploy. And I can launch it as a standalone, but I'm not really sure why I would do that, because it's not gonna run without my database. But here's demo, which is that composition that I made before. So I am going to launch a composition. And kind of the way that I view this, kind of coming from a theater background, of course, I really like to view our compositions as a rehearsal for my code. Much like I wouldn't want to come up in front of you lovely people and give this talk without a rehearsal, I also don't want the first time people are seeing my feature to be at staging. I want to be able to take feedback and implement that feedback, so that way, by the time it gets to staging, it's exactly how I want it. So what you'll see is once this finishes in a sec, it'll just spit out this link, and I can click that link and see my application in action. So here is that link. Click it. There we go. Cool. So here's my application up and running now. Cool. So here's my application. I can play around with it. I can send this link to anybody. They don't have to have CodeFresh. They can open it up, take a look, give me the feedback that I want. And almost done here. Just gonna pop over here. And then if I want to add any tests or anything like that, you know, we kind of have this standard. You can set up your own YAML build if you wanted with a CodeFresh YAML, but you can also come in and use our UI, add a unit test. Pretty self-explanatory. We also have the ability to push the Docker registry. So, like I kind of mentioned before, these pre-staging environments are super helpful. I mean, I personally am a big fan of them, as you can probably tell from this talk. But you can build the tool yourself, or you can use someone like us, or I mean, I would prefer that you use us, obviously. But come and talk to me afterwards if you have any questions. My coworker Ron is also here in the back with the lovely CodeFresh shirt, and we'd be happy to talk to you about your CI/CD and kind of hear your thoughts on this talk. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.